Okay, do it again. Ooh, it's like that record that you brought home one time. And what are we listening to?
A warped vinyl record. So I was out walking the dog today, which is the day after garbage day. And there's this vinyl record laying on somebody's lawn next to where you'd normally put the garbage. I went, oh, a vinyl record. So I brought it home. Now I know why it was at the curb.
And what does that mean?
That means it'll go out of tune.
Okay.
It's not set up properly.
Oh, and how do you set it up properly?
You got to take these screws here. Well, first of all, you got to take everything off. And then you got to take the spring. There's springs in the back here that basically it's a big counterbalance.
Okay.
There's up this here. I'll show you on this guitar. A spring-loaded teeter totter. It's a brilliant design. Some people like to set the bridge up to float, so it's beveled a little bit so that you can do that. But that's not how you set it up. Even though people will argue that point with me. It's like a balance and a counterbalance. The strings are like a big set of springs trying to raise this whole thing up, right? Because you've got this little balance point right here. The springs counterbalance the string tension, and they hold this block in place here. Two things you have to do in order for Stratocasters to play in tune. You need to set the bridge so that it rests on the body in the full stop position. That way, all of your bridge tension is into the body, so that when you hit the strings, the vibrations from the bridge actually enter into the body and add to the resonance of it. Some guys like to float this thing. When you float it, you don't have nearly the surface area of all the transferring of energy. And I can prove that. Hear the difference?
Okay, show me what you discovered today.
You're transferring energy into the body, which is going to act as a resonating field. So I set the bridge flush to the body, and I have to adjust the springs. And there's ways you can adjust these springs. You can either tighten these bolts into the body, which pulls the springs more, or sometimes you don't need 5 springs. Sometimes you need 3. And because if it's too tight, you can't use the there's too much tension.
Oh,
so
okay.
In order to overcome it, you got to really rafe on the whammy bar. When all 5 of them are there, it's really stiff. Okay. It's hard to do. So a lot of times you can use 4, sometimes you can use 3, and if 3's too little, you can take this one here and go to here. So you're making the spring have a little bit more tension on. You know, there's lots of ways you can do it. That guitar there most likely has these screws down too low. And when that happens, the bridge lifts up slightly. You got tuning issues, you leave your hand on it. They'll rest their arm or their palm on the bridge, and they'll be playing, and it'll go out of tune. If you break a string in the middle of a song, if you've got a counterbalance system,
oh no,
your counterbalance is on. The whole guitar's out of tune. The whole guitar's out of tune if you break one string.
Okay.
So setting it to flush with the body is, to me, the very best way. The one thing that it hampers you in, when you use the whammy bar, you can only decrease the spring tension. You can't increase it. You can't go above, because it's a hard stop into the body. I think I set this guitar up before. I set it on a bench with nothing on it, no springs, no nothing. And I'll put one spring in the screw in the middle, and all of a sudden you'll see the bridge go, whoop, too much, and you just let it down. And I'll do each one of those 6 so that it's flush.
Okay.
It's exactly right. I mean, there's a tiny little bit of play, but hardly any. I usually start with 3 springs, and I'll usually angle them at first, and then I'll find out, depending on the tension of the strings that I use, how much spring force you need. And if it isn't enough, you can always tighten these, or you can add more springs. But it's always a counterbalance with a Stratocaster. It's a balanced counterbalance. But with that one there that we just did, it's not set up. I'll set it up the way I like it, so that when kids play it, if it won't go out of tune for them.
Yeah.
And the amazing thing about this is, this was the whole idea why Leo Fender wanted to make a Stratocaster from the Telecaster. The idea was he wanted to build a guitar that had a built-in whammy bar. Because up until then, you had these great big things called Bixby vibratos.
Vibrato.
The Bixby vibrato arms go above and below, which is why people set this thing up to flow. It's a subtle thing. I don't use it all the time. I use it in shows sometimes. When it calls for it. It's a cool thing. But I'll never have intonation problems. Yeah, and that's the other thing. Say you're changing your strings and you're tuning up. You get one string in tune, so then you go to do the other one. Well, now you tighten that one up. Now the other one's out of tune because you just changed all the counterbalance.
Oh, geez.
So then you do the third one, and the other two are out now. I mean, it's like tuning them is a nightmare because every time you change the tension, you're constantly having to adjust. Having the thing set it right flush into the body does two things. One, actually three. Make sure you'll always be in tune. Okay? If you break a string, you'll always be in tune. Two, when you're tuning up, you don't have the intonation problems. Three, you're transferring more resonance to the body of the guitar, if that matters. And I think it does.
Yeah.
It has a lot to do with the resonance of the guitar. There's some people out there who go, it's nothing but the pickups. That's a wrong answer because, take a humbucking pickup that's in a Gibson Jazz box and a humbucking pickup that's in a Les Paul, and they don't sound anything alike, but it's the same pickup.
Right.
Gee, why is that? Because everything else
resonance.
matters. Yeah, you got a fully hollow 3 3/8 inch body versus a solid piece. Well, actually, it's a piece of mahogany with the maple laminated on top of solid wood. But this is actually a pretty good guitar for being a Squire. And they're actually made
for being a Squire.
The problem is that they use cheapy pickups, they use cheapy pots,
they
use cheapy jacks.
Like you were saying earlier before I started filming, on your Casino.
It's an Epiphone version of a Gibson 330.
Yeah, all you did was replace the pickups.
And the bridge.
And the bridge, yeah.
Yeah. And the rest of the guitar is like really good. And actually, the stock pickups are pretty good. I just wanted to upgrade to these Jason Lawlers, which are really good pickups. But the problem is, like with the bridge on Casinos, they have a tendency to use this cheap bridge. It has this wire that holds the intonation screws down, and it buzzes. It buzzes because it's cheap. It's a cheaper bridge. I bought what's called a Tone Pros is the company, and they make them direct replacements, and man, they're rock solid. And actually, my original Casino that I got had the same issue. I put some RVT on it to dampen it, and actually my Riviera was the same thing. I put a piece of RVT on it. I go, I don't want to.
What's RVT?
It's a sealant. It's like a gooey kind of stuff.
Okay.
It's a marine sealant. It's great for electronics. It's a non-conductor, kind of like glue, but gummy glue that won't conduct and it never come off. It's kind of like if you got a boat and you had a slight leak, you'd put it on there.
Use boat glue to fix guitars.
Yeah. Well, guitars. I use it. Like say I've got a component in an amplifier that isn't the right size, and because like capacitors. Sometimes you can't get the exact same size capacitors that were in the amp. Right. And they're smaller sometimes.
But they just don't make them anymore?
Well, they were specific for that amplifier. They're not making that amp anymore. So you got to go, all you care about is the value, the electronic values. So if I need, say, a 30 microfarad capacitor at 450 volts, well, I can't get the exact size that they had before. And I'll maybe zip tie it down, and then I'll put it on some of that RVT. It ain't going anywhere. This is a million times better than the pieces of junk that I had when I first started. But that's all you had back in 1966.
Right.
You didn't have, mass zillions of guitars.
You didn't have Guitar Center, which your dad couldn't
Fender,
afford.
$300. Oh, well, first of all, they just said, we're not buying you guitars.
Yeah.
So I had to have a paper out. so I can.
Well,
buy
back then,
guitars.
$300 that could like pay your whole house in college.
Oh well, 300 might as well have been 3 million.
Yeah.
Okay, there's no way. But I bought a $60. I bought a $60 electric guitar at Wright's.
Okay.
I earned $60 working all summer and get my paper route.
Right.
2-3 months, and then I bought a guitar. I've been buying guitars ever since. I got these in the far ones, these ones on, so it makes the springs longer. And then I tightened these up so it puts more spring tension on there. And I made sure that this bridge was set flush into the body and balanced perfectly. Can't you hand me a napkin? I use lemon oil. The boards get all dull and dirty and dingy. And you put oil in it and it just comes alive. But I don't like to do it with too much. I usually let them set overnight, let the oil soak in, but I don't have time.
Right.
She needs these for tomorrow. So I scoured all the frets. So what you have to do is you got to tape off the board with masking tape so that just the frets show, and then you take steel wool. And you take all the corrosion off. And this lemon oil then helps clean the board and then adds luster to the rosewood or whatever kind. These are like kid guitars.
Yeah, I mean,
parents
it's
get them
shorter
for kids.
neck.
They don't know if they're gonna use them or not, and they pay $100 for these, and then they go, well, if a kid never uses it again, no big deal. I'm out, whatever it is, $100. These string winders are great. They're basically a little electric drill. Somebody thought to put a peg winder on one end. These are great. This is what we had before, and you just did this, right? Okay. And before you just had to do it by hand. Forget it.
When were those invented?
Oh, the string winders?
Yeah.
Oh, well, they've been around since, I don't know, 70s.
Oh, okay. Well, you said before. I'm like, well, what do you mean?
Well, it was in the 60s, I started playing guitar in 1966. Shortly after I saw the Beatles on Ned Sullivan.
Oh, of course. That's when everyone started playing.
That's right. When I play the Epiphone Casino, which is basically a Gibson 330, it's a Beatles guitar, as a matter of fact. But I use it for big band because it's fully hollow, and I can get a big band chunk out of it because of the fully hollow. And it's got P90 pickups, which are Gibson single coast. They got their own charm to them. I like them, but it's a 24 3/4 inch scale. Fender scales are 25.5. So because of the longer string length in Fenders, 10s are what I normally play because you can bend them, and they got pretty good tone. But I'm putting heavier gauge strings on these because the scale is so short on them that if you put thin gauge strings on them, it's just like hair. There's no tension at all, and the tone is just god-awful, and they won't stay in tune. I'm putting 10s on here because it's a really short scale. It's like 24. They'll feel like 9s, but if I put 9s on here, which is what I put on that other Squire, which is a full scale, can't keep strings like that in tune because they're just so skinny, and they'll just go out of tune. Now, what did I do with the first string?
It's on the table.
Oh, there it is. Right.
Yeah.
Is that it?
No.
Oh, it's right here.
Yeah. As a kid, I used to find those everywhere.
I know.
I would step on them in the middle of the living room.
They throw them on the floor. I think I get them all.
No.
I use what's called the over-under method. I know some guys tie it off earlier, but I just take it usually about 1.5 the distance there, and then tighten it, and then you go. The first wind goes over, and the next one goes under, and it basically locks the string in place onto the post so that it doesn't slip. That goes over the top, and then you go under it, and it locks that string, and then you wind it real nice with this automatic winder, and you get a nice tight wind, and when you go to tune it, it helps keep it in tune. And then you add a little bit of graphite into the nut so it doesn't bind. Funny, a friend of mine who's a really good amp tech, recently he called me and he goes, "It won't stay in tune." I goes, "Okay, go down to a hardware store and get yourself some graphite in a tube, ground graphite, and put it in the nut. Because what was happening was it would get bound in the nut, and then he'd be playing it, and then it would just jar loose because it was all being pent up inside the nut there. Mm-hmm. And so he went down to our store and got, you know, a $1.50 thing of graphite and put it in there. He goes, "That guitar hasn't been in tune for 35 years. I wish I would have asked you sooner." Like I said, I wish I had a nickel for every guitar I restring.
No, for every string you restring.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
each
That's
guitar
right.
would be 30 cents. So 14 guitars times 6 strings.
Oh, 84 times a nickel.
Yeah, that's
$4 and something.
Okay, but we can do the math here. $4.20.
Is that what it is?
Yes, but like, how many years have you been restringing guitars?
I have owned over 500 guitars. It was well over 300 because I used to sell them.
Okay, so how many?
And I'd always restring every one of those. Plus, I'd be playing. When I was playing steady, you change strings every 2 weekends. I would only get 2 weekends out of a set of strings.
Wait, seriously?
That's all I wanted.
Okay.
Because anymore, you bend them so much in the middle of a gig, they break.
Oh.
So you go.
You played continuously.
Well, I was in the Filter Kings for 7 years.
Right.
Because I quit in 2007.
So yeah.
But I would still freelance now and then, just occasionally. And then I started doing the Stardusters thing. In
12.
Oh no! In 2009, I started playing musicals.